Should we go ahead and get started? Team, ready to go? Ready to roll? So I would like to welcome everyone to this session D7 on transformational change. And what this session is about integrating human rights-based, gender-sensitive, and feminist approaches into national evaluation systems, with the idea that this is a really important element to promote transformational change. So we have a very distinguished panel here today, and I'm really quite honored to serve as your moderator. So I'd like to start by just giving a really quick introduction to our panelists, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about each of them as the session goes on. So I'll start by introducing, I'm not going to go in order here, I'm going to jump around the table. I'd like to start by welcoming Dr. Shabnam Safraz, who's a senior advisor in the social sector in social sector and development, and who, among many other things, has served as a member of the Federal Planning Commission in Pakistan. Next to me, we have David Marcheseau, an evaluation manager with Global Affairs Canada, who has extensive multidisciplinary experience in development and in evaluation. Then next to David, we have Dr. Angelina Matijo Bazugba from South Sudan, where she's assistant professor of social policy and also the dean and director of the National Transformational Leadership Institute at the University of Juba. And then at the end, we have Daniela Jacques, who is the president of the Chamber of Commerce of Women Entrepreneurs in Haiti. And just to introduce myself, my name's Heather Bryant, and I'm an evaluation advisor with a double affiliation. I'm with the UNDP Independent Evaluation Office, but I'm currently working with the Global Evaluation Initiative. So I'd like to welcome all of you very warmly, and I'd also like to encourage some of you that are kind of in the back to maybe come up a little bit closer to the front. We're not a huge group here, and I hope that we can just turn this session into a conversation. But the way I'd like to run this is I'm just going to say a few more words to set the scene, and then I am going to hand over to our panelists, and I'm going to ask them to speak initially for 5 to 7 minutes around in answer to an opening question. Then I might have a couple of follow-up questions for them, or I may just turn directly to you, the audience, for your questions to the panel. And I hope we can have an engaging discussion, despite the fact that it's right after lunch. And some of us have had a very, very hectic 2.5 days, and we might actually be more interested in a little nap. So once again, this session is focused on integrating human rights-based, gender-sensitive, and feminist approaches into national evaluations systems for transformational change. So why are we talking about this? We might even ask, why are we still talking about this? But we can come to that a little bit later. So there's sort of two starting points for this session, and one of them is the postulate that transformational change, that the vision that we have in the 2030 agenda of a world free from poverty, hunger, and want cannot happen without gender equality and social inclusion. So of course, as you all know, the 2030 agenda recognizes that gender inequality is a key challenge to human development. And we of course have one of the SDGs that focuses on achieving gender equality and women's empowerment. And I think today, especially all the conversations we've been having over the last 2.5 days have re-emphasized the fact that this is even more critical than it was in 2015, because with the pandemic and the climate crises and other things happening around here, we're seeing that there's a continual exposition and exacerbation of gender inequalities in local, national, and global structures. And I think we also all recognize that a focus on gender alone is not enough. There are many other forms of exclusion that limit people's abilities to live a life of dignity, and freedom from want. So that's the first part. The second pillar underlying this session is the discussions we've been having over the past 2.5 days about the importance of national evaluation systems to support transformational change. So if we want to promote transformational change, which another one of my bosses, the director of the Independent Evaluation Office of UNDP, says is about quick change. It's about really turning things around. It's no longer about the incremental change that we've been focusing over the past decades, but we really need quick, inclusive change. And that again requires strong monitoring and evaluation systems to tell us what's working, what's not working, for whom, where, and why. So if we bring these two things together, it's clear that governments and institutions need M&E systems that themselves are gender and inclusion responsive. And I think you'll probably all agree that we're not quite there yet. So one of the questions to everyone here is, what will it take to get there? So to get the conversation going, I would like to turn to our eminent panelists. So I think we're going to have some really good ideas for us. So I'd like to start in the middle there with Dr. Sarfraz, who, as I've mentioned, has served in the Federal Planning Commission in Pakistan, where she led the entire social development portfolio and was responsible for the overall financial control and oversight of that cluster's delivery and performance. She's also been serving as the focal point for coordination with ministers, senior bureaucrats, bilateral and multilateral partners for social cohesion and the social protection agendas. She also led the National COVID-19 Secretariat, and despite the economic contraction, managed to secure 410% higher allocations for the health sector in Pakistan. And her list of accomplishments is very, very long, but I am going to stop there because I think it'll be much more interesting to hear from Dr. Sarfraz herself. So to get this going, Dr. Sarfraz, you've been a member of Pakistan's Federal Planning Commission, and in addition, one of your interests is advancing gender transformative leadership. Could you share your thoughts on how you see the integration of gender and social inclusion and/or feminist approaches into Pakistan's national monitoring and evaluation systems? Over to you. Let me pass that.
Can I have my slides? Is somebody helping us? Oh, okay. It's there. All right. Okay. Oh, okay. All right. So thank you so much for the introduction. And I'll be sharing with you Pakistan's gender story, a little bit on the context and what we were able to steer during COVID-19, when we suddenly got a spotlight on the social sector. And as I was leading the social sector portfolio, I could take a cross-cutting look at gender and how we could weave it into our interventions and into the subsequent monitoring evaluation that we undertook. So a little bit about the context of Pakistan. We are a country with 112.5 million female population, and 48% of our women are literate as compared to 70% of the men. Their most probable images, what you see over here, which are likely to come to your mind about the women in Pakistan. Less is known about these iconic women who excelled and have gained global recognition. As diverse as these women, Pakistan is not one average number. Huge disparities exist across provinces and then within provinces across the sub-districts. According to UNESCO estimates, around 129 million girls are out of school, out of which 10.5 million are in Pakistan. Of the 32 million of those in primary school age, 5.5 million are with us. Conscious efforts are consistently being made to make the subnational governments aware of their contribution to the national and global burden of out-of-school girls by using some of these evaluations and graphics that are in front of you. We worked with the Bureau of Statistics to get population estimations for 5 to 16-year-old to establish the out-of-school proportion, at the subnational level, and even for each of the 144 districts within these provinces. We delved deeper and disaggregated this data to understand the primary and secondary gap. Based on these back-end workings and subnational confirmations, we were able to put together an evaluation framework to allow the high-level sectoral reviews. For our meetings, these dashboards allow selecting any district and see the total population of out-of-school girls for any of these 144 districts disaggregated by age. For decades, the gender advocates in the country have highlighted the violence experienced by the women in an attempt to promote gender parity in the country. In the recent year, we changed the narrative to highlight the return to education for girls, which is 8.5% as compared to 5.5% for boys. With support of UNICEF, the cost of out-of-school children in Pakistan was recently computed, and we were successful in getting the agenda, getting its due attention in the National Growth Strategy, which is under formulation. In a digitized survey conducted amongst the youth, which makes up 65% of the country, gender mainstreaming across policies and programs was identified as a priority initiative for the government to pursue by the young people of our country. The labor force participation for the 76 million women of working age in Pakistan stands merely at 22%. Majority occupy the informal sector with a huge wage gap. The turnout of women in last election was only 46%. Recent surveys depicted 5% women being in the managerial role, despite gender gap being closed at the tertiary education level. Learning from the exercise of the out-of-school girls that I just shared, we moved to collate the labor force participation rates of women as the next high-level policy target for the ministry. We were successful in identifying struggling districts by plotting HDI and MPI trends for each of the 144 districts of Pakistan. All this was incorporated in a single screen dashboard, which captures the latest status of out-of-school girls and female labor force participation, as well as ranking of the district vis-a-vis MPI and HDI, making it easier to prioritize districts for girl child education and labor reforms in each province, and giving the district authorities their targets by sharing the denominators with them. Economic evaluations supported by the World Bank have been phenomenal in helping us bring gender mainstreaming to the highest policy tables. This slide depicts the 5 scenarios where GDP is enhanced by increasing the labor force participation through a certain percentage. The gender focal points have been notified by each of the 42 ministries, and they are steering these initiatives. And through the data which was collected from them, 11% females are amongst the total number of staff which is currently working in the federal ministries in Pakistan. Out of the total staff promoted, only 20% were females, and you can see a sharp declining trend of females promoted to the highest scale. This is a very recent survey that we conducted. Gaps in female desired facilities were identified across all the federal ministries, and finances are committed to address the same in the coming year. This is all to make the environment gender conducive. We further conducted another survey across 80+ women leaders of Pakistani origin, and achieving work-life balance and lack of mentorship and training opportunities were listed as the biggest constraint to climbing up the career ladder. And this is something which is part of our initiatives now that we will be pursuing in the coming year. Recognizing that 77% of our health workforce is women who are hugely underrepresented at policy tables, the Women in Global Health Pakistan chapter was launched in 2019 as the first chapter in South Asia to promote gender transformative leadership. 1,000 nursing faculty scholarships were rolled out in the year 2020, which was labeled as the Year for Nursing. This slide lists out some of the policy initiatives which we had launched the National Gender Policy Framework at the International Women's Day this year. The gender accelerators have been established in national and subnational planning departments. Sub-advisory committees of experts are advising the Planning Commission on gender initiatives. A technical working group is looking at streamlining the computation of national and international gender indices. And we selected SDG 5 very bravely to present on the first and second voluntary national review at the UN Political Forum, even this year. It indeed takes a village to do something right. A multi-level approach was critical to achieving this. The Planning Commission served as the secretariat for working with government counterparts, the development partners, academia, research institutions, both nationally and internationally, to advance the gender agenda. This slide enlists some of the recent, and this slide, what you see over here, shows a snowflake model, which was extended, and we created an enabling environment and engaged partners for creating collaborative spaces for iterative adaptation of high impact strategic interventions for advancing the SDG 5. My last slide. Yes, this is my last slide, and it represents the pledges which were shared by all the partners when we launched the National Gender Policy Framework. They were part of the process from the very inception and co-partners in its designing and now in its implementation and subsequent evaluation. It is hoped that these robust evaluation of these initiatives and better use of evidence will help us create a much more equal Pakistan. Thank you for your patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shabnam. You've really started this session off nicely with several examples of how you've been able to use data and evidence to influence discussions at the policy level. And I'm sure the colleagues here will have questions for you in a little bit. But let me move on to our second panelist, who is just here to my right, Mr. David Marcheseau, who, as I already mentioned, is a senior evaluation practitioner with a multidisciplinary background, which was formed through his unique combination of experience and both professional experience in the field and his academic vocation. And he's worked in Latin America, Africa, and Canada. He has a doctorate from the University of Toronto, focusing on international development and the voices of participants. He thus has a deep understanding of the application of qualitative methodologies and looking at their impact on research outcomes. In his current position as an evaluation manager with Global Affairs Canada, he continues to challenge and grapple with power imbalances and what he identifies as systemic post-colonial mindsets that underlies traditional evaluation practice. He's thus deeply interested in bringing about change through meaningful feminist orientations and methodologies. So, David, I understand that Canada adopted a feminist international assistance policy in 2017, and that since then, Global Affairs Canada's evaluation function has been reshaping both the what and the how it evaluates. And could you tell us a bit more about this how aspect of the question and how you actually go about integrating a feminist lens into our work as evaluators? Over to you, David.
Thanks, Heather. So as Heather mentioned, my name is David Marcheseau, and I work in the evaluation division at Global Affairs Canada. Our team at Global Affairs is responsible for conducting all of the evaluations on our diplomacy, international assistance, and international trade programs in accordance with Canada's policy on results. I'm really delighted to be out of my basement and to be part of this privileged panel to kind of share a little bit of our experiences and learnings on doing something that's really stubbornly hard, which is, changing the approach, behaviors, and tools of our evaluation practice. So for many years, Canada has been at the forefront of integrating gender-sensitive approaches to evaluation. In the last few years, however, we've challenged ourselves to take our practice a bit further through the integration of gender equality and human rights. As Heather mentioned, in 2017, Canada launched its first Feminist International Assistance Policy, or the FIAP. And in the words of the policy, this represented a fundamental shift in what we do and how we do it. This included evaluation. Since then, our team, led by Isabelle Mercier, has been on a journey using feminism as a beacon to find ways to better reflect the FIAP's core beliefs into our evaluation practice. Oh, sorry. Is that, yeah, change, sorry. With feminist evaluation, it's really easy to get caught up on labels. And we've had discussions on this throughout the week. And I think it's clear that this is an issue. But at its core, a feminist evaluation is an evaluation that describes and tries to embody three core feminist beliefs. First, there should be equity amongst humans. Secondly, gender inequity leads to social injustice. And lastly, gender-based inequalities are systemic and they intersect with other causes of discrimination. In 2018, we started small and we experimented with feminist evaluation approaches in one case study within a broader country evaluation program. The next step was to explore ways in which we could take our data collection and analysis more aligned with the 8 core feminist principles. We then did this in our gender empowerment in the Middle East evaluation, for which we developed in partnership with Canadian and local researchers, a gender empowerment measurement tool, as well as a privacy protection tool, which are both available to all of you. In 2020, the evaluation of the Women's Voice and Leadership program provided an opportunity for us to take this journey one step further. And this was the first time that our team explicitly guided an evaluation from start to finish using feminist principles. So where are we at now? We're still learning, but recognize the immense value that this approach has provided our work. We're learning from these experiences and continue to share our journey internally within our department and within our teams, ourselves, and externally with colleagues like you all around the world. Understanding that feminist evaluation takes many forms, we're developing various sets of guidance to help our colleagues integrate or better integrate, we feel, these principles in different types of evaluations, including those that don't lend themselves a bit naturally to evaluation principles, feminist evaluation principles. And we continue to learn from these different experiences. Feminist evaluation is an approach and not a methodology. I think that needs to be really understood, underlined, bolded, whichever way you guys want to do it. It's a way of thinking about evaluation, not a predetermined set of tools. Specifically, feminist evaluation fosters processes that are reflective, empowering, and participatory, and strive to provide a platform or a space for women and marginalized voices to be heard. Many of us are already doing feminist evaluation without even knowing it. So kudos to you guys if you're employing some of these ideas and principles. This framework provides a point of reference to meaningfully consider these issues throughout evaluative practices. In taking a shot, as Wayne Gretzky said, by considering practices and principles of feminist evaluation, as you navigate your work, you take the chance to create meaningful findings and results that are participatory, holistic, and empowering. As we work with our decision makers at home to continue advocating for the added value of mainstreaming these principles within our evaluative work, we're working internationally to encourage others to consider taking steps in adopting feminist principles as well. The GEI is but one place where these passions of ours converge. Currently, we're collaborating on 2 major lines of effort to increase localization and increased adoption of feminist evaluation principles within the GEI. Firstly, we want to work with greater number of evaluators from the Global South to conduct GAC decentralized evaluations, or Global Affairs decentralized evaluations, sorry. How, you say? We see the opportunity in supporting GEI's CLEAR networks and leveraging their objectives and strengthening of national evaluation capacities and systems. And in working with the GEI and CLEARs, we have begun to see if there's opportunities for something that would benefit them. If so, we're keen to foster discussions among bilateral and multilateral partners on how this initiative could be scaled up. Secondly, and what I think is really interesting, we're wanting to enhance the gender and inclusion theme across the GEI portfolio and foster innovation and creativity in strengthening M&E country systems. And so we're working with the initiative to launch a 3-year feminist innovation in monitoring and evaluation project that would capitalize on the GEI's current strategic alliances, its ongoing engagements with various implementing and associating partners, as well its experience in addressing gender issues in M&E capacity building and programs globally. In particular, through the collaboration and leveraging of existing tools, platforms, and databases, we hope to optimize these limited resources to set realistic goals and produce concrete results. This would ultimately strengthen the GEI's overall products and services. In closing, what we are advocating for, or what I'm advocating for today, is not a blanket use of feminist evaluation approaches, but a conscious reflection and application of methods and approaches that work to push gender equality forward. I believe that the feminist evaluation is just simply better evaluation, which allows us to conduct evaluation work in a more respectful, ethical, and impactful way, which is, essentially what we all want to do with our work, I would hope. Whether you use the term feminist or not doesn't really matter, or rather whether your context allows you to use it. The principles described here are worth exploring in every evaluation you participate in. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Also very inspiring, and I'm glad to learn more about what we're going to be doing together with you as the Global Evaluation Initiative Network. So let me pass the mic to Dr. Angelina Matijo-Bazugba, who is a gender and women's rights practitioner, academic, and researcher. She's the first founding director of the National Transformational Leadership Institute, which serves as an outreach arm of the University of Juba by providing adult learning and outreach programs across the nation to existing and aspiring women and men leaders. She's also a co-founder of the South Sudan Women's Coalition, one of the key stakeholders in the revitalized peace agreement. This is a coalition that brings together over 60 women's organizations advocating for women's rights and peace in South Sudan and the region. Dr. Angelina holds a PhD in social policy from the University of Edinburgh and has written on issues of women's rights, feminist approaches, and dimensions of power in politics, to just mention a few. So, Dr. Angelina, we've been hearing a lot over the last days about national evaluation systems, and you have extensive experience working in advocating for feminist approaches and enactment of gender responsive policies and programs in South Sudan. With that experience, what would be your advice to government entities who are working to strengthen their M&E systems? How do you think we can ensure that an evaluation system is gender responsive? Over to you, Dr. Angelina.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me in this panel. I think there's quite a lot that the government as a key stakeholder can do in terms of, maybe I should just put this off, the government can do in terms of shaping the gender agenda, but also in terms of, really bring the transformative aspect of the M&E that we're talking about. I look at the government's role in terms of being there to really come up with the policies we are talking about. But before even going to the policies, over the past 3 days, we've had people talking about the political will. The government, that is the first and foremost thing. If the government is willing to really come up with the policies that will address the issues around monitoring and evaluation, but also looking at the program that are really giving impact, but also being willing to assess, what they may have put in the plan, whether this is the national strategic plan or this is the is any sort of policy that is geared towards ensuring that this development, then we would really look at it as a commitment. But again, commitment can be assessed in terms of looking at the resources. You need to back up the commitment in terms of allocating resources. And for me, that speaks it's a lot about political will. So the political will without resources in itself, I would say that is blank, or is rather blind, because then you are saying you're moving forward in terms of having the legal framework, you're moving forward in terms of having these progressive policies, but the policies that are statements of intent without necessarily attaching it to the commitment that will help you to really see how you will execute the plans, but also being able to monitor and evaluate how those activities have actually yielded the intended income to the community or to the citizen, then it's useless. So I see that the government has a bigger role when it comes to having the will, but also move a little bit of that will to institute systems and processes in place, but also having the system that also allows the citizen to be able to look at what the government is giving, but also their ability to access information and question information, but also to assess and being able to measure as to where they are and the sort of milestone they're able to pick up, but also generate lessons that can help them to learn as to what they have achieved, what they have not achieved, but also accepting where there are also deficiencies or insufficiencies in terms of implementation, and they agree to say these are the lessons that we can take forward in terms of us improving whatever activities we may have going forward. I also look at the role of the government in terms of ensuring issues of gender and inclusivity. How are those policy framework designed? Are they addressing issues of women, men, girls, boys, people living with disabilities, but also all the other people we have, the vulnerability or the vulnerable group we have in the society, the elderly? Are they all integrated in this framework in terms of not only having planned, but also how much are we allocating, how much are we bringing them on board to assess and evaluate the sort of plan we may have in place? Beyond this, I see the role of government in terms of really allowing the various information. We're talking about conducting research. There could be bodies such as National Bureau of Statistics that are very critical in a country to really oversee elements of, for instance, conducting census, conducting research that can generate information that can inform the government in terms of policy making. But also such kind of information is very critical in terms of pushing on for advocacy activities, but also providing evidence-based information that will be used by the parliamentarians for them to decide on what policies are more responsive to the issues affecting the people, and getting them to the point where they can use this information to generate a lot of more lessons that can help them to inform other planning and development processes. I also see the role of government in terms of building capacity. Here we're talking about massive awareness, creating awareness to the people for them to really appreciate the essence of having this system, but also the essence of them having part in having their voices integrated in the whole process of planning and implementation, but also having their voices in terms of assessing the outcomes of what they may have already planned. So if the government allows this, instead of having civic spaces shrinking, because right now we are talking about the shrinkage of civic spaces. If the civic spaces are actually narrowed, that means you are constraining the massive awareness to really penetrate to the point where people can be able to speak out, voice out their concerns, and be able to say, this is what we want, and we can be part of that for the sake of ownership. I also see the role of government in terms of appointing or instituting mechanisms such as oversight mechanism. We can look at, I can take an example of issues of gender quotas. We do have, for instance, gender quotas that has been approved. That was initially we had 25% gender quotas for women's representation. And after the signing of peace agreement in 2018, we were able to move it a little bit to 35. Now, that was a victory to us, because then what we are saying is that we were able to speak about representation as being there, but also number is not sufficient. It's about also helping this in terms of quality. How do we support this in terms of number, where they have set in their feet to now to be able to be influential and to be able to play out a fair ground in terms of changing some of those gender blind policies and so forth. So what we realized is that the 35% gender quotas was actually undermined or underplayed by political parties for many reasons. They will appoint, but every now and then you will see that the number is not attained. And when we were helping the community or the citizen to really start questioning, why is it that there's non-implementation? Because we know the ball was in the hands of the political parties. Many parties were telling us women are not ready, women are not there, or, oh, hold on, you wait, your time will come. Now we are moving in the transitional period. It's okay, you will be there. But the question is, why do we have the number? Why do we set aside the goal and then we're not able to implement? So we reached the point where we said, no, we need an oversight mechanism. And what is this oversight mechanism? We do acknowledge that the government can set up a board or a commission that will man or will monitor the implementation of gender quotas. I'm using that as an example. So if the government is going to institute the oversight mechanism, or right now the government can argue that the Ministry of Gender, Child and Social Welfare, apparently which is mandated to promote gender equality and women's empowerment, can be used as one of the institutions to monitor. But who guides the Ministry of Gender? Is the president. If your boss is the one who is actually underplaying the policy you have, you cannot challenge the boss, because the next day you are out. That means that mechanism is not able to really implement or deliver to people. So we do need an independent body. It is appointed by the government, the systems and procedures, but it should be an independent in the manner of deciding and in the manner of summoning the political parties that are not able to play what has been agreed. And if it doesn't, can we go to another level, taking them to the courts? Maybe we can even go to the court of East African. I mean, we've attempted to do that, going beyond the country, and we go to the regional courts and see how we can really bring out those who are actually breaking the rules and underplaying what has been agreed. Talk about a number of other things that the government can do. I think we do see the aspect of the government sharing the information. How open are they? And also, it's not only the government, but also the different players. I'm talking about the agencies, I'm talking about organizations, I'm talking about the civic groups that are also involved in collecting information. So the big question is, who owns the data? Who owns the information? How can this information come in and being collected at one point, whereby it can be used, it can be disseminated widely, and eventually being used as part of monitoring and evaluation, but also inform the government in terms of where we are. And it goes beyond having that information. The next step is, how do we safeguard that information? Today, I just had, I think in the past session I was attending, somebody was talking about having political dialogue. And I do hear about that. Political dialogue can be good because you are providing information for political parties to pick it up and they can use it for campaign. But there are times when political parties can also misuse such kind of information. How would you safeguard that, but at the same time make sure that the government doesn't stop them from using it? And here I'm talking about how you can really ensure that even the CSO, particularly in the context of a country like, for instance, South Sudan is in the transition period. So there are levels where there is about your security. You as a person, even as we speak, you may not know what will happen in the next minute, but also you move to another level of the information you produce. The information may be banned. The newspaper may be banned just because it has written about something. So these are issues that we need to talk about it and also see how we can move in terms of ensuring that it really serves for people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Angelina. At lunchtime, we were actually having a meeting with several of the people that have been taking notes during all of these sessions to really see what a lot of the key messages from this conference have been so far. And I think in your sort of 7-minute intervention there, you've hit on quite a lot of them. The importance of political will, the importance of backing that political will up with resources, the importance of citizen engagement, the importance of independence, and the ability to use and not misuse information. So let me move on to our fourth panelist, Daniela Jacques. And Daniela is currently the president of the Chamber of Commerce of Women Entrepreneurs in Haiti, as I mentioned in the beginning. And since 2015, she's also been involved with numerous initiatives promoting the rights of women and girls with support from UN Women, UNDP, the US, and Canada. And Daniela herself is a businesswoman active for more than 15 years in the fields of communication, shipping, and the production and marketing of castor oil. I had to look that one up because she gave it to me in French and I didn't know what it was. For the last 5 years, she's also been working as a coach supporting young businesswomen across Haiti. So I'm going to be asking Daniela a question. I think she's going to speak in French. So if you need your écouteurs, you can go ahead and put them on. Daniela, you've been engaged in monitoring and evaluation in 2 programs in Haiti. One is called the Spotlight Project in the Département of the Grand Anse, and another project that has been supporting women entrepreneurs. What have you learned through this experience that could be useful for others who are working to establish gender responsive monitoring and evaluation systems, whether this is at the project, the sectoral, or the national level? Over to you, Daniela.
Bonjour, est-ce que vous m'entendez? Il est ouvert? Ah oui, c'est vrai. Bonjour tout le monde, merci. Je suis très heureuse d'être là et à cet événement très important. Donc aujourd'hui, je vais partager avec vous l'expérience de la CCFEH. Oui, s'il te plaît, merci. De la CCFEH, qui est la Chambre de commerce des femmes entrepreneurs d'Haïti. Je vais passer rapidement sur les grands événements et les projets qu'on a eus. Depuis plus de 5 ans, on fait le sommet international des femmes du numérique et c'est un sommet qui réunit les femmes dans le secteur technologique. On fait aussi le forum économique des femmes haïtiennes. Et maintenant, excusez-moi. Oui, donc on a aussi la semaine de l'entrepreneuriat féminin. C'est un programme d'échange qu'on organise avec d'autres pays où on amène un groupe de femmes d'affaires pour discuter et avec d'autres femmes qui sont dans le même secteur qu'elles. Donc là, je vais parler de 2 projets que la CCFEH en fait, a exécutés avec 2 partenaires différents. Il s'agit de Atteindre qui est un projet financé par l'USAID et l'autre projet c'est, je vais en parler tout à l'heure. Maintenant pour le projet Atteindre, autonomiser les jeunes femmes entrepreneurs pour la création de richesses et d'emplois stables et décents. Donc la première partie du projet était de faire une académie de l'entrepreneuriat féminin pendant 3 mois. Donc, on a formé plus de 300 jeunes femmes dans le pays. Et ensuite, la deuxième phase du projet, c'était un concours innovant pour des femmes entrepreneurs. Donc, ces femmes ont pu partager et préparer des documents. Et elles avaient un accompagnement technique pour faire leur plan d'affaires. Et jusqu'à la fin, ensuite, les lauréates ont reçu un prix de $10 000 pour démarrer leurs petites entreprises. Et le second projet, c'est un projet des Nations Unies qui s'appelle Spotlight et financé par le Canada et d'autres partenaires internationaux. Donc, dans le cadre de ce projet, la CCFEH a fait ce qu'on appelle le renforcement des organisations des femmes. En Haïti, il est très difficile puisque l'État haïtien n'a pas vraiment mis de moyens financiers disponibles pour les organisations de femmes. Donc, nous, au niveau de la CCFEH, avec l'appui des partenaires, on a pu les accompagner pour les aider à être beaucoup plus fortes, à pouvoir préparer les documents de projet, à faire des rapports, etc. Et l'autre partie de ce projet était de faire un plaidoyer pour mettre fin à la violence faite aux femmes et aux filles. Pour arriver à ce qu'on appelle monitoring and evaluation, nous avons utilisé un outil très intelligent qui s'appelle Service CTO. Cet outil nous a permis d'avoir des données fiables, de nous assurer de la confiance du bailleur, puisque quand vous travaillez avec les organisations internationales, il faut toujours s'assurer que le partenaire se sent en confiance parce que non seulement vous faites votre travail, mais aussi vous assurez de l'évaluation du projet que vous êtes en train d'exécuter. Ça nous permet aussi de mieux stocker nos données en cas d'argent liquide depuis notre ordinateur. Donc, les techniciens qui sont sur le terrain avaient un ordinateur pour pouvoir prendre les données au jour le jour que le projet s'exécute. Ça nous facilite aussi le traitement des données à la fin du projet, mais aussi assurance mobilité dans le processus de collecte des données. Donc, cet outil-là est très efficace parce que quel que soit l'endroit où on n'est pas obligé d'avoir accès à Internet. Dès que le système est déjà installé sur l'ordinateur, donc on peut faire le suivi avec les bénéficiaires qui sont sur le terrain. Maintenant, et avec ce système qu'on a mis sur pied, ça nous a permis de mettre en place le principe de régularité tous les trimestres. Donc, tous les mois, c'est un délai raisonnable et stratégique pour le suivi des petits projets, notamment dans les pays pauvres ou en développement. Est-ce que vous pouvez changer? Donc, ce laps de temps entre 3 mois, ça nous donne la possibilité de faire des changements dans la vie des gens et leurs conditions de vie. Donc, on voit déjà comment évolue le projet, quels sont les résultats, est-ce qu'on est sur le bon chemin, est-ce qu'on doit, parce qu'après chaque 3 mois, on peut réévaluer et mettre en place de nouvelles stratégies pour nous assurer qu'on va vraiment vers les objectifs et les résultats attendus. Avec ce système aussi, on a mis on a beaucoup plus de preuves pour nos rapports. Donc, on prend des photos, on fait des listes de présence et ordre de mission pour les techniciens qui vont sur le terrain, rapport de mission après chaque mission et aussi des témoignages. Donc, on a un espace disponible pour que chaque participant, chaque bénéficiaire puisse partager leur témoignage par rapport au projet. Donc, ça encore, c'est un autre outil qui nous permet de voir où est-ce qu'on va, est-ce que vraiment le projet est satisfaisant sur le terrain. Bon, sous-financement du projet, du suivi et de l'évaluation. J'ai vu au cours de la semaine, on en a parlé. Et c'est vraiment, moi, je pensais que c'était seulement en Haïti, mais j'ai vu que beaucoup d'autres pays en parlent. Et chez nous, quand on parle d'évaluation, et si vous faites un budget et que vous mettez les moyens pour recruter une ressource, eh bien, ça ne va pas passer automatiquement. Il faut vraiment discuter et pour prouver que c'est nécessaire. Donc, le problème de sous-financement est vraiment partout. Et dans le projet Atteindre et Spotlight que je viens de vous présenter, on a été confronté à un manque de ressources pour le suivi et évaluation de ce projet. Le suivi et l'évaluation comme point de départ. Dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre de nos projets, nous avons fait le mauvais calcul de recruter le point focal à la fin. C'est ce que je disais tout à l'heure. Donc, parce que puisque la réponse qui nous vient automatiquement chaque fois, c'est est-ce vraiment nécessaire? Est-ce qu'on ne pourrait pas mettre cet argent, ce fonds sur un autre pilier du projet? Et nous, à la fin, quand on a pris cette décision à la fin du projet, donc l'expérience est super bonne, mais on a appris que désormais, quel que soit le projet qu'on va faire, eh bien, le point suivi et évaluation doit être au premier niveau, puisque ça nous permettra vraiment d'atteindre les objectifs et les résultats escomptés. Donc, ces deux expériences nous ont montré clairement que le suivi et l'évaluation, la communication doivent fonctionner ensemble. Ce trio peut contribuer à la mobilisation des ressources en mettant en lumière les acquis et les impacts positifs dans la vie des bénéficiaires et des initiatives. Merci.
Merci, Daniela. We have about 20 minutes left in this session. And so rather than me talking more, I'd like to open the floor to the audience to see if you have questions for the panelists. So 1, 2, and then 3.
Ok, je disais que je m'appelle Pascal Moukania, je viens du Burundi. Je suis MNI analyste au PNUD Burundi. Ma question à David. Je veux encore comprendre encore davantage sur l'approche féministe. Ça m'intéresse. Quels sont les principes de l'approche féministe? Et puis, je voulais aussi savoir la différence qu'il y a entre l'approche féministe et l'évaluation féministe par rapport à l'évaluation genre. Quelle est la différence? La première question. Et la deuxième, ce n'est pas une question à Daniela, mais c'est une contribution. Et je pense que cela doit interpeller tout le monde pour cette conférence ou dans la salle. Dans la plupart des programmes, on considère la fonction de MNI comme une fonction reléguée au dernier plan. Et c'est au finish, quand les choses sont bloquées, quand rien n'avance, c'est alors qu'on commence à avoir besoin des suivis, évaluations. Je pense qu'il est important qu'on fasse le plaidoyer pour que nos programmes, nos agences, nos institutions arrivent à institutionnaliser la fonction des MNI. C'est très important. Merci.
Merci. Nada in the back.
Thank you. I have two questions. One is to Daniela. Comment avez-vous engagé les gens du culture conservatrice? And the second question is, did an evaluation, you think of doing an evaluation once the project has ended to see the real impact, especially when it comes to women, after the evaluation has ended, like 6 months after it ended, a year, 2 years? Has that ever been done, or has that ever been thought of to be done to see its value? Thank you.
I'm sorry, Nada, could I just come to the last question was, has it ever been thought about doing an evaluation, say 6 months or even 2 years after something has come, after the project has ended?
To see the real impact, has it lasted?
Okay, is there anyone in particular you'd like to address that one to? Or just any of us?
Anyone.
Okay, thanks.
And what about me? Je n'ai pas bien saisi sa question.
Elle voulait savoir, je crois, si vous avez rencontré des difficultés engagées ou parler avec des personnes qui sont peut-être d'une culture un peu conservatrice, ou peut-être ces questions genre sont plus difficiles à aborder.
Ah, d'accord. Yes.
Did I get that one right? Then Prudence, and then maybe we'll do a round and then we'll come back.
Thank you. I would like to thank the panelists for their presentations. I have two questions. One is to David. I followed his presentation quite closely, and I've got an interest because we're just coming up with a new national plan, and we are at the point where we are framing what is called an implementation plan, which also constitutes some theories of change, which can be used to undertake an evaluation. I was also, like my friend behind, interested in knowing what the principles of the feminist evaluations are, so that we can embed those as we are doing the theories of change, so that we are able to follow through as we come to evaluate to see whether what we put into the framework as some nuances around these principles were actually implemented. It would be good if you'd comment on that. How can we put those elements in, and what can you give examples of what that means actually in any context? Thank you. And then the next one is to Dr. Safraz. Yes, I also saw that there were a lot of efforts, I think, made by the lobby group in Pakistan to bring to the fore the importance of the government or policymakers taking seriously the aspect of, I think, was it gender mainstreaming or women empowerment? Just to be clear, because I saw something about 1,000 nurses being given scholarships. To me, that's a traditional field of nurses in Pakistan, as was mentioned. It's a predominantly female-oriented field. What are the things that they are doing to make women break barriers into traditionally male-oriented professions like engineering, STEM, and all those kinds of things? It would be good to get some reflections from there. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. I know there were some more hands, but I think we'll let the panelists give maybe a quick round. I think David has been asked to give us a course in feminist evaluation principles in 3 minutes. We'll see what he can do with that.
I'll be as quick as possible. So yeah, so on the 8 principles, and obviously these are nuanced, and there's much more detail which we can share with you if you want to reach out. But essentially, the principles are really based around, and I was talking with my boss Isabel about the issues that we're facing really require us to be human and to be good people, if you want, for lack of a better word. But some of these principles talk about being action oriented. So one of the principles is really being, this is a political act. Feminist evaluation is a political act. So making sure that is embedded within the process. Thinking of gender as a social construct. It cuts across race, class, ethnicity. So making sure that is considered as well when we're building our evaluations. Also examining discrimination, thinking about discrimination. And ensuring that whatever it is that you're looking to evaluate, there is utility. So it's an act of trying to create positive change. And so this happened. This is another principle. Also, one of the principles is around the methodologies. Those are really contextually specific. The things that that's why it's not a prescribed toolkit. You do X, Y, and Z and you get A, B, and C, right? It's really about understanding the context, understanding what you're dealing with, and then selecting and choosing and being realistic about what is possible. And so there is a sense of, you can implement and consider feminist principles even in the most resource constrained situations. So it's really important to think about context. Also thinking about how knowledge is really powerful. The knowledge that we create has weight to it, right? And so really thinking through some of those issues as we develop our M&E system or evaluation or whatever is really, really important. And lastly, there's also multiple ways of knowing. So thinking about the communities, the people, the representation, ensuring that you have potentially Indigenous voices involved in an evaluation, making sure that marginalized groups and women are at the forefront of these things. And so those, I don't know if that kind of speaks to a little bit about the principles that we speak to. But it is also, this is not a principle, but I think it's really important that this is acknowledged, is that it's about creating a space for dialogue, right? It's really important, I think, for us as evaluators we are privileged with the opportunity to do the work that we do, and that we need to create the space for the voices of those who may not normally have a voice to be heard and to be engaged in the processes that we work in. I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you so much, David. Shall we pass it to you, Daniela?
Je dirais que oui, en 2022, malheureusement, on ne peut pas s'enorgueillir de dire que c'est un sujet qui passe automatiquement, puisque le fait qu'on ait des femmes qui sont docteurs, des femmes qui sont premières ministres, des femmes qui sont présidentes, et disons qu'on trouve des femmes à tous les niveaux, ça pourrait vouloir dire que aujourd'hui, ce que nous avons cherché et ce que nos grands-parents, nos grands-mères se sont battus pour, on a ce qu'on cherchait, mais pas du tout. Jusqu'à aujourd'hui, dans certains pays, les petites filles ne vont pas à l'école. Jusqu'à aujourd'hui, dans certains pays, les femmes sont encore battues. Et c'est pour ça que nous, au niveau de la CCFEH, nous croyons que les droits des femmes, et en fait pas les droits des femmes, nous croyons que l'autonomisation économique des femmes est un droit fondamental. Car à partir de là, la femme, elle a au moins un choix. Elle n'est pas restée dans une relation violente parce qu'elle n'a pas les moyens, parce qu'elle se dit, mais qu'est-ce que je vais faire avec mes enfants? Si je laisse ici, je ne vais pas pouvoir louer une maison, je vais être dans la rue, etc. Parce qu'elle a les moyens, elle a une petite entreprise, elle peut se débrouiller. Donc oui, et c'est parfois très difficile. Et même la nouvelle génération, celles qui sont plus jeunes que moi, c'est très difficile. Je me rappelle que je donnais une conférence dans une université en Haïti et il n'y avait que des hommes, que des étudiants. Les femmes, et c'était le 8 mars, elles étaient dehors, elles ne sont pas rentrées dans la salle, ça ne les intéressait pas. Et à la fin, moi, je leur ai dit, j'ai dit aux étudiants qui étaient là, et merci d'être venus à cette présentation, mais ces jeunes femmes doivent savoir que ce qu'elles jouissent aujourd'hui comme droit, d'aller à l'université, de choisir le métier qu'elles veulent faire, etc. Il y a des centaines de milliers de femmes qui se sont battues, qui ont été tuées, qui ont été violées, qui ont été expulsées de leur pays parce qu'elles se sont battues pour que nous, les femmes, on ait les droits d'aller à l'université. Donc, c'est encore un combat et je pense que c'est extrêmement important. Et quand on parle de féminisme, qu'il soit un homme ou une femme, eh bien que de savoir que tout le monde doit s'y mettre, tout le monde doit y penser puisque la femme, c'est la mère de l'humanité. Si on continue à les traiter comme ça, eh bien, un beau jour, il n'y aura plus d'humanité, il n'y aura plus personne, quoi. Donc, voilà, merci.
Merci, Daniela. Can I pass it to you, Dr. Shabnam?
There were a couple of remarks which I would want to respond to. One was around conservative minds. So in our experience, there's always resistance, so there are conservative minds and there are resistant minds. So what worked well for us was that when we were designing these evaluation templates and these systems, we co-created them. And the templates that we made, we passed them back to the implementers to fill out despite having the data, so that they had an ownership. Otherwise, they would just say that we don't, they would just not own up the data on which we are evaluating. And that worked. So we were partners in evaluation rather than, on opposite side. So that is something I wanted to share, which worked with us. For nursing, that you pointed out on the nursing scholarship as an initiative. Pakistan was labeled as one of the top 5 countries to learn from in its response, despite having huge constraints at time of COVID-19. And when this recognition was happening, so on the policy tables, you would hardly see any nurse, or despite all the nurses being there on the front line. And we have 77% of our workforce being females, but there are very few, 1 to 2% at the leadership level. So the scholarships were given for faculty development so that we see more nursing leaders and involve them in decision making and have them in leadership positions so that they are involved in decisions about the sector in which they are actually leading. And the third thing that I think you asked about was the male-oriented fields. It's very important. And I think the first step that we did was to have gender disaggregated data. And we started from the ministries. And we saw that in some of the cadres, we didn't have even a single female. The evidence was strong and it was picked up, and they asked for revision, looking at the recruitment policies and making it mandatory for females to be in the panels, females to be, and if, the decision was taken that till we have some sort of gender parity in those certain positions which were male dominated, the women will be given a priority. So till the time that we are able to equate that. So I think the power of this disaggregated data and bringing it to the attention of policymakers cannot be undermined. And that was our first step towards it, in a very, very male-dominated policy environment, I would say, because I was leading a team of 64 men. So talking about violence and gender was very difficult. So how to, and I think the changing the narrative for them to see not using women and its impact on GDP was more attractive to them to work. And I mean, if we are educated and we are in jobs, we will be able to take care of violence ourselves, So that was my approach towards it.
Thank you very much. We are running out of time, but I know there were 2 or 3, oh my goodness, or 5 hands here. And we have 3 minutes left in the session. So if we could maybe have, as a colleague said in another session, sort of Twitter linked questions, so that then we can have Twitter linked responses. So maybe we could start in the back, and then we can move forward, and then over to Ketty at the end.
Thank you. It's a question for Angelina. You refer to the role of government entities to support monitoring and evaluation systems. And I thought it was interesting that whereas in the morning, the first panel emphasized a lot learning, you refer mostly to accountability. So my question is, do you see a role for governments in supporting M&E for learning and transformational change? Thank you.
Oui, question tweet, comme on a dit, très rapidement. Moi, c'est une remarque d'ordre général, parce que depuis hier, nous attendons cette question de financement de suivi et évaluation, revient à chaque fois. Mais je crois que le suivi et l'évaluation lui-même, c'est un instrument de mobilisation de ressources. quel est ce partenaire quand vous lui donnez des résultats, il a mis de l'argent et que vous lui donnez des résultats. C'est vrai, le premier d'abord, c'est le suivi que le projet garde le cap et on obtient des résultats transformationnels. Mais le second élément qui est là, qui est un élément important, c'est que celui qui a donné l'argent, que ce soit le gouvernement ou un autre partenaire, il veut avoir des résultats et regarder les résultats. Et ça l'encourage à nouveau à vous donner un deuxième financement. Donc, c'est un outil lui-même, un instrument lui-même de mobilisation de ressources. Et je pense que les discussions, dès le départ, doivent mettre un accent sur ça, que c'est un outil important de mobilisation de ressources, le suivi et évaluation. Merci.
Very quickly, you started out that David saying that there are so many, there's labeling, feminist evaluation has so many nuances. And I understand from the quick description that you gave about, the principles, it's very close to the intersectionality approach that is now very well mainstream to some extent, quote unquote mainstream. I was wondering whether, labeling feminist, this kind of evaluation is a political statement, much on the same line as Dr. Sarfraz was pointing out. In other words, you change and adjust, the narrative according to the political environment where stakeholders can accept the narrative about feminists. You can use feminists, otherwise you may label this kind of evaluation approach in another way, like more digestible, if you want. I want to recall a very important article from Donna Padams from South Africa. She was able to conduct a feminist evaluation, but she could not mention that she used that approach in the final report, because it was not accepted by the organization. Is that something that you think you're going to face when you then sell your messages out there? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I can't help but want to jump in. I was like, I want to respond, so I will. I just do want to mention that we are happy to share what we have. The principles, we have some tools that we've used. We have some webinars that we've recorded, and I'm happy to send links. David will gladly, I'm sure, share his contact information. So if you're curious about more, happy to share. Wasn't enough time to go through in detail what we've done, but for us, the word feminist matters because our government has declared itself as feminist, but what matters more is that we do good evaluation work. And if not declaring ourselves overtly as feminists in certain contexts means that we could still do the work that we do in the way we want to do it, then I'm okay with that. Because ultimately what I care about is doing the good, solid evaluative work. But I do think that there's value in our government declaring itself as feminist. That's a political decision. It's a decision that we've embraced and that's been easy for us to embrace. But the word feminist, if it trips us up, then we're not that committed to it. And there was something else I did want to mention. Darn, I've forgotten it. But we're very happy to share our materials. And of course, I'll let David jump in if he wants to add more.
Oh, okay. That's okay.
Just very quickly, I want to bring also a question to the title of this session on national evaluation systems and transformational change, and really the urgency of shifting our actions and understanding the urgency that is in informing this change. How do you see national evaluation systems in your countries in the context that you work? How we need to reform those systems so that it better reforms the urgent reform that is needed for the world?
You stole my closing question, Ketty.
Je suis Jean-Yves Nalcaz. Bon, je parle français. Je suis d'Haïti, comme ma collègue Daniela. Je vous remercie tous et toutes pour vos présentations, vos excellentes présentations. Et je crois que c'est un très beau thème que nous avons cet après-midi qui, malheureusement, n'est pas épuisé. Parce que quand on parle d'évaluation et genre, c'est vraiment un sujet sur lequel on devrait avoir beaucoup de temps pour en discuter et partager les expériences. Je ne vais pas poser de questions, mais surtout, je voudrais partager avec vous certaines appréhensions. Et ça concerne les pays en voie de développement, les pays pauvres et particulièrement Haïti. Lorsqu'on parle d'évaluation en Haïti, ça fait peur. Et le terme évaluation n'entre pas dans notre mentalité de peuple. Au niveau de nos institutions, les gens ont peur de rendre compte. Or, nous savons tous que rendre compte, évaluer, ça nous permet d'avancer, ça nous permet de résoudre les problèmes que nous avons et de nous améliorer au profit de la population. Maintenant, le cas de genre aussi, ça fait problème chez nous. Oui, je termine. Et pour aller directement au point, je voudrais vous dire que lorsque vous élaborez des projets, il faut toujours prendre en considération la question de genre. Par exemple, moi qui suis chef de projet, on engage, dans le cadre logique du projet, il faut engager un consultant en genre, mais malheureusement, on a mis ça jusqu'à la 3e année. Or, le projet dure 4 ans. Moi-même, personnellement, en tant que chef de projet, je décide de recruter dès la 1re année parce que ça, c'est extrêmement important pour nous. Donc, pour terminer, je vous dis de prendre en considération la question de genre, surtout dans nos projets. Merci.
Thank you, everybody, for your questions. And I really agree that there was not enough time for this session. It was 1 hour and 15 minutes, the last session of the day on the last day of the conference. But I would like to ask our very eminent panelists to try to, I'm asking them a lot here, sort of in 1 to 2 minutes each to try to touch on answers to the questions that have been asked here, but also try and just give us in a clear, short statement, kind of what is the final message each of you would like the rest of us to take away, so that as we continue to strive to strengthen national evaluation systems from whatever our position in this broad ecosystem might be, what do you want us to remember? Let's just go in order in the panel here. So just go ahead, David.
I will be very quick. What I'd like for everyone to take away is that these things are tough. These things are hard. They take time, they take effort, and it takes nuance. To respond to your comment around, is it a political statement that we say feminist evaluation? Yes, because we want to get people's attention. Is it really hard? Understanding that evaluation creates fear. The word evaluation, feminist, creates fear. It's like a double negative almost. So you're already like shooting yourself in both feet before we get off the bat. But is it worthwhile? It's important. Like you just said, we have to be considering, gender. We have to be considering inequities when we're conducting evaluation, because it just simply makes sense to do good evaluation by including those that we are evaluating in the process. And so, like Isabel said, we'll share with you our content, our information. We'd love to collaborate with you on things moving forward. But we need to move on this, and we need to keep kind of, be in lockstep and help one another through examples and encouragement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think in conclusion, what I can say, government has a major role in terms of supporting evaluation. I spoke about political environment, but basically when you talk about the overall environment, it requires the political will, it requires the policies, the framework, but also commitment in terms of allocating resources. So when you have the system in place and you go as far as building capacity of the various players, but also giving them time to take part in the design, in the implementation, as well as in monitoring and evaluation. You will find that there's a lot of learning, but also when the information is gathered, government has a role to accept that such information has to be disseminated, widely, but also how to make sure that that information can be repackaged to reach out to various actors. And then out of that, lessons can be learned and lessons can be used to be replicated elsewhere. And that is very critical because without the government, even other players can't work in an equal level ground. Thank you.
I have a confession to make. It has been hardly ever that a policymaker has come to me asking me on a gender-related matter to be explored and come up with, So if somebody came to me with out-of-school children, I made a conscious effort to delve deeper and give him the, insights which were focused on gender element. If he came to me for youth, I made sure that the demographic dividend estimations that I made did had a gender element onto it. If it was growth strategy, I made sure that the labor force participation contribution of women on GDP are highlighted. So I think for quite some time, even for the years to come, particularly in low middle income countries and developing world, we are responsible as technocrats and evaluators to bring that subject to the policy table in a very candid way, So I feel that's the responsibility on our shoulders. It will be very rarely in rooms full of hundreds of men to bring up gender as a subject to talk about.
Bon, je voudrais que chacune d'entre vous garde à l'esprit après cette session, comme on parle d'évaluation, profitez-en, prenez du temps pour évaluer la situation générale et de la condition féminine dans votre pays, dans votre quartier, partout où vous êtes, car je suis certaine que tout ce qu'on a pu avoir jusque-là peut disparaître en un clin d'œil. Et c'est ce qu'on voit qui se passe actuellement dans le monde entier. Merci.
Can we have a big round of applause for our panelists here? So many, many thanks to Daniela, to Dr. Shabnam, Dr. Angelina, and David, and to all of you for being here with us. And I think I'll just finish with David's words. We need to move on this. And if I can just invite you to join us in